setting up a temperature sensor with wind speed on the Ventra XT. To maneuver to the setup screen, you can hit your menu hotkey, go to Control Device Setup, and then you want to highlight, add a control device, press enter, and then we're going to choose from this list air sensor. And then when we're here, we're going to choose the number temp sensor that this one is, and in our case, this is temp sensor number 3. And then arrow, and now we're going to choose the zone that the temp sensor is in. And this would be if you had multiple zones in your barn, whichever zone this temp sensor is programmed to or wired to, that area, that's where you will choose it. In our case, we're in zone 1, so we're going to arrow on. We're choosing module 1, which is the analog input section that is attached to the interconnect board. And then we're going to arrow over, and we are wired to channel 12 in this case. Press enter. Press enter to confirm. Then we're going to go to our input device settings to continue setting up this particular sensor. Now, as you can see, it chooses air sensor 1. So we're going to group through here. There's air sensor 2. There's air sensor 3, which is the one that we just added. So now we're going to set each area that needs to be addressed. And in this case, we're going to first set our cable length. And in this case, it's only about 3 feet of cable. So we're going to hit enter, push 3, hit enter. And we're setting the cable length because the way the Ventra series operates is it measures the resistance between the end of the temp sensor and into the Ventra. And the more accurate sensor reading will be if you have the cable length as close as actual to what it really is. You will get the best temp sensor reading. So then we're going to arrow down. Now we're going to set our wire gauge. You can hit enter to change to whatever wire gauge you're using. In this case, we're at 24, so we'll leave it at that. Arrow down. Now we can set a temperature offset in the event that you think your temp sensor is reading slightly off, or if you want to put an offset on it for some reason in the particular zone that it's in. Here's where you can set that. You just put in either a plus or a minus. If you want to go above or below the actual temp sensor reading, you can set that in. Ours is reading okay, so we're going to leave it at 0. Arrow down again. Now we're going to set the location. Remember, since we chose birds originally in this controller, we have the option of using a brood, a grow out 1, or a grow out 2. Depending on how your barn is set up, you may have only 2 sections versus 3, but here you can choose which section that sensor is in. And in this case, I'm going to choose grow out 2 for an example, and say that's at the back of my barn. So I'm going to set that. Now, as you'll see later, this will affect whether the controller is looking at that sensor and using it depending on which area of the barn you have set up on your controller. We'll go over that in a minute. As we go down to finish setting up, the default is used for wind speed, yes. So we're going to leave it at that because it also does measure wind speed on this particular sensor. But if you had a sensor that did not use wind speed, you just change it to no, and then away you go. We do have yes, so we're going to leave it at that. Now, when you do have a wind speed sensor, there is a cal value associated with each sensor, and it will be on a decal on the actual temp sensor. And as you can see there, it reads a cal value, and in this case, it shows 628.82. That's an example. The one that we actually have has a cal value of 838 for the first calibration, and then 82 for the second calibration. So we have now set that. We can go back to our home screen. We are now showing 3 sensor temperatures. The third one is the one that we just put in there. If we go to current status, you see how airspeed, average air for sensor 1 and 2 is off because they are not wind speed sensors, and the third wind speed sensor does show an airspeed of 1.7 miles per hour. That one is a wind speed sensor, so it's showing you that it's there. Now if we go to control settings, this is where I was talking about your house mode. Here's where you can set up your house mode depending on where you're at in your grow. You know, when you get brand new birds, you're probably going to be in brood. If you have third house, you have 2 sections to grow into or move into, or if you only have 2, you would choose it as that. So in this case, I just put the house in control mode brood, so my third sensor would not be taken into a calibration or calculation for averaging the house and turning on and off devices because I'm in brood mode. Now again, if I go back to control settings, I'm here in brood. If I highlight it, I now change it to grow out 2. I am now in grow out 2 house control mode, and my controller would read all 3 temp sensors and use it in calculation for turning on and off devices based off of which sensors are controlling those devices. And that is setting up and programming a temperature sensor with wind speed.